Brad Stevens picked up the phone. On the other end, the Golden State Warriors front office. The subject, Stephen Curry. What came out of that call has both fan bases talking, and it's not the trade everyone expected. Boston's president of basketball operations has been laying groundwork for months, but what he and the Warriors actually landed on says more about where Curry's career is headed than any mock trade package ever could. So let's get into exactly what Stevens agreed to and why it matters right now. Here's the headline everyone's been passing around. There's no doubt Brad Stevens has already been on the phone with the Warriors brass to pitch a deal for Curry, according to Celtics insider John Corrales. Not a hypothetical, not a league sources say someone might call someday. An actual conversation between the man running Boston's front office and the people who decide Steph Curry's future. Corrales didn't stop there either. He added that Boston has a path to making a decent deal for both sides. That's the part that turned a rumor into a real conversation around the league. Not Boston wants him, a path. Something workable. Now here's where it gets interesting, because what came back from that call wasn't a yes. It wasn't a no either. It was something in between, and that in between is exactly what Stevens walked away agreeing to. The Warriors side of the story, relayed by their own insider Danny Emerman, lays it out plainly. Emerman said the information available in terms of what Steph has said publicly and what people around him have said privately is that he wants to finish his career as a Warrior. He went further, saying he doesn't see that changing, but then he left the door cracked. It's possible that things can change and go really sideways, and maybe he has a change of heart. But no, the Warriors want him to finish as a Warrior, and he wants to finish here. That's the agreement. Not a trade, not a no comment. An understanding. Stevens keeps his line open. The Warriors keep their commitment to Curry, and both sides quietly accept that circumstances, not intentions, will be what moves this. Nobody's forcing anything. Everybody's just watching. And here's the detail that makes Stevens' call make sense instead of looking like a shot in the dark. Curry, on his current $62.5 million expiring contract, would be open to taking a pay cut for the right opportunity, meaning if the Warriors land a difference maker to pair with him and Draymond Green. That's not Stevens making things up. That's a real crack in the wall, even a small one, and it's exactly the kind of crack a front office executive calls about. So why would Stevens even bother making that call if Curry's telling everyone he wants to stay? Because Boston's whole operating philosophy right now is built on exactly this kind of long shot positioning. When Stevens dealt Jaylen Brown away this past summer for Paul George and a stack of draft picks, he sold it to the fan base using one word over and over: optionality. When Brad Stevens pulled the trigger on the Jaylen Brown trade that returned Paul George, 2 first-round picks and 2 second-round picks, he sold optionality as the main selling point. Optionality means exactly this: the Curry call sitting there as a live wire, ready to be pulled if Golden State's situation deteriorates enough. And it might be deteriorating. The Warriors, once the model franchise of the sport, are coming off a 10th place finish in the West last season. Not a play-in missed 10th, with Kevin Durant long gone and Jimmy Butler still working his way back from a torn ACL. The Warriors have had to rely far too much on their aging veterans to keep them afloat. That's the backdrop Stevens is calling into. Not a thriving contender protecting its franchise cornerstone. A team in decline, propping up a 38-year-old superstar who still somehow put up 26.6 points a game last year. That's the deal Stevens agreed to without a single asset changing hands. He gets to keep calling, the Warriors keep listening, and everybody waits to see if the version of Curry's future that both organizations say they want, him retiring in Golden State, actually survives another losing season. To understand why Stevens made that call in the first place, you have to go back to the trade that set the whole thing in motion, the one that made Celtics fans furious and analysts confused in equal measure. Boston shipped out Jaylen Brown, an all-NBA caliber wing still in his prime, and got back Paul George, 2 firsts and 2 seconds. On paper, it looked like a step back for a team that had just been a championship contender. The move was seen as a downgrade by many fans, who now have the Celtics on the outside looking in on the Eastern Conference playoff picture. But Stevens had a reason, and it wasn't really about George at all. Explaining his rationale for the deal, Stevens pointed to the mechanics of roster building at the top of the league, citing the challenge of having 70% of our cap and such a high percent of our usage tied into 2 players. Translation: Brown and Jason Tatum, as talented as they were together, had become an expensive, inflexible combination. Stevens wanted flexibility more than he wanted to keep that exact pairing intact. That's the whole reason Curry's name is even in the conversation. Because George's contract, unlike Brown's, has an expiration date. Having a contract that expired, plus 2 potentially premium first-round picks, gave the Boston Celtics a chance to quickly flip those assets into something more meaningful moving forward. George isn't part of Boston's long-term plan. He's a trade chip with a shelf life, dressed up as a starter in the meantime. And once you frame George that way, the Curry idea stops sounding absurd and starts sounding like exactly what Stevens built the whole George trade to enable. One insider's proposed framework has Boston sending George's contract, which would be expiring by next summer, and some first-round picks to the Warriors in exchange for Curry. Bleacher Report's Zach Buckley sketched something similar but bigger. George plus a young wing named Chris Sinak Jr., plus a 2027 first-round pick, a 2031 first-round pick, and a 2032 first-round pick swap, all headed to Golden State. Buckley's pitch for why Boston should even want a 38-year-old this badly leaned hard into fit. He argued that Curry's gravitational pull could be just what Tatum needs to unleash the full powers of his potent isolation game. It's not a crazy read. Defense is built entirely around stopping Tatum in isolation, would suddenly have to account for the single greatest shooting gravity the league has ever produced standing 30 feet away. That changes spacing on every single possession, and it doesn't require Curry to be the player he was in 2016. It just requires him to stand in the right spot and make defenses pay for forgetting about him. There's a colder argument buried underneath all the fit talk too, and it's the one that should worry Celtics fans more than excite them. One analysis pointed out that Boston is currently a couple of moves away from being at the talent level of the New York Knicks or the Philadelphia 76ers. Not exactly where a team expects to be after making the finals a couple years earlier. Stevens isn't calling the Warriors because Boston is thriving and wants to add a luxury piece. He's calling because the roster, post-Brown trade, needs an infusion of star power fast, and Curry is one of maybe 3 names in the league who could provide it overnight. And the math, ugly as it is, actually works better than people assume. Curry's $62.5 million annual number is enormous, but it's also an expiring contract by the time any real deal would need to close, which means whichever team takes it on isn't locked in long term. One report even floated that a third team might be needed just to reshuffle the numbers, so the whole thing is legal under the cap for everyone involved. That's not a small hurdle, but it's not the kind of hurdle that stops a determined front office from calling in the first place. It's the kind of hurdle Stevens has clearly decided is worth exploring anyway. So when you line it all up, the Brown trade built for flexibility, the George contract built to expire, the picks stacked up specifically for this kind of swing. Stevens' phone call to Golden State wasn't some random impulse. It was the entire summer's rebuild pointing at one number on Boston's target list, and that number belongs to Stephen Curry. Here's the other half of the agreement, and it's the half that actually explains why Stevens didn't get a yes. Curry has spent his entire career, all the way back to being drafted, in one uniform. That's not normal in this era of player empowerment and super team hopping. It's rare enough that it puts him in the company of guys who define a franchise rather than just play for one. One columnist framed it plainly. Curry has always said he intends to end his career with the Warriors, understanding the power of spending a historic career with only one team. Following the lineage of Bill Russell, Tim Duncan, Kobe Bryant. That's not a throwaway line. That's Curry's entire brand, built over close to 2 decades. And the Warriors have shown repeatedly that they're not interested in being the organization that lets that streak break on their watch. Emerman's reporting made clear that the Warriors want him to finish as a Warrior. He wants to finish here, and there's a business reason layered under the sentiment too. The front office is reportedly preparing to offer Curry a maximum extension this August. You don't offer a max extension to a guy you're shopping. You offer it to the guy your whole organization is still built around. But committed doesn't mean thriving. And that's the tension sitting underneath every one of these conversations. The roster around Curry has been gutted by circumstance. Durant left years ago. Butler, brought in as the 3rd star to replace him, is still working his way back from that torn ACL. The result, as one outlet bluntly put it, has been a gradual decline over the years, culminating in a 10th place finish in the West last season. For a franchise that won 4 championships in a decade, that number stings in a way box scores rarely capture. So what's the Warriors' answer to all that losing? Stability. Double down. This offseason, the organization brought Steve Kerr back to run the bench again, and Curry didn't hide how much that mattered to him. He said flatly, "I'm happy, man," adding that it mattered that Kerr made the decision on his own terms, because you want to make sure everyone is invested mentally, spiritually, and physically in what the grind is. Curry also talked about what comes next for the partnership, and it wasn't nostalgia, it was recalibration. He described the current phase as collaborating on new ideas to try to get us back to where we belong. And think about it differently, while still trying to maintain our culture and our core principles to the level that we were. He was honest that the roster around him looks nothing like the dynasty years. Different team, different era. He said the league demands you adjust and adapt, and that he trusts Kerr to handle that shift. The numbers behind that partnership are staggering on their own, and they're part of why the Warriors are so reluctant to blow it up. Across 12 seasons together, Curry and Kerr have combined for 604 regular season wins, 104 playoff wins, 6 NBA Finals appearances, and 4 championships. That's not a coach-player relationship you walk away from because of one bad standings finish. It's the foundation of a franchise's entire modern identity. The front office backed that stability play up with more moves. Golden State brought in veteran coach Frank Vogel to join Kerr's staff, adding significant experience alongside Kerr as the Warriors look to turn things around. They've also started restocking with youth, bringing in rookies to build a foundation around the core that's still intact. None of that looks like a team preparing to trade its franchise cornerstone. It looks like a team trying to buy itself one more real shot before that conversation with Boston ever has to become something more than a phone call. But Curry himself hasn't pretended the standard has been met lately either. Even while embracing the rebuild, he acknowledged the pressure that still hangs over every season in the Bay. "We always talk championships because that's the standard that we have," he said, admitting it's still in the back of your mind. But he was also blunt about where the roster actually stands right now, saying flatly that you have to start from scratch. That's the Warriors side of the agreement Stevens walked away with. Not a rejection, a holding pattern, one built on genuine loyalty, a genuine coaching partnership, and a genuine hope that Vogel, Kerr, and a younger supporting cast can get the record moving in the right direction before the phone rings from Boston again. Here's where the story stops being just Stevens and the Warriors front office and starts pulling in everyone with a microphone or a column inch. Because once word got out that a call had actually happened, the entire basketball media ecosystem started weighing in from different angles, and none of them agree with each other. Start with Marcus Thompson at The Athletic, who's covered Curry longer than almost anyone in the business. Thompson was the one who first floated that Curry and the Warriors might not exactly be aligned anymore. And that single sentence, from a reporter with that much credibility inside the organization, was enough to send the rumor mill into overdrive. It wasn't a bombshell, it was a crack, reported carefully, and it was enough. Then there's the skepticism camp, and it's led by the same reporters breaking the story. One SI analyst who covers the Celtics closely admitted he's not entirely confident in Curry being traded this season, calling it a bit of a shocking development if he did, even while confirming that Stevens made the call in the first place. That's the strange split running through basically every report on this story. Everyone agrees the call happened. Almost nobody thinks the trade actually gets done. On the analytics side, there's a more clinical voice making the case for why Boston should keep pushing anyway, numbers aside from sentiment entirely. One Bleacher Report breakdown pointed to Curry's colossal plus 9.9 career net differential as the kind of number that should have Boston's analytics department fully convinced of his value as a co-star next to Tatum. Regardless of age, that's not a scout's gut feeling. That's a front office spreadsheet argument. And it's exactly the kind of thing that keeps executives like Stevens making calls that never seem to go anywhere publicly. Fans, for their part, have split into two loud camps with almost no middle ground. Some see the numbers and jump straight to enthusiasm, floating packages built around George and Peyton Pritchard for a shot at pairing Curry with Tatum for what would essentially be one last run at a title. Others push back hard, arguing Curry's age and the size of the return required make the swing not worth it, especially with George already the wrong side of his prime. Both sides are working off the exact same reporting. They're just weighing the risk completely differently. And then there's the Warriors side skepticism, which cuts the deepest into the whole premise. Emerman didn't just say Curry wants to stay. He made the case that no amount of outside pressure changes that calculus, unless the situation inside the building actually collapses. His read was that the information from Curry's camp, public and private, all points one direction, and that unless something drastic shifts, that's not changing. What ties all these voices together oddly is that none of them are calling Stevens crazy for making the call. Even the most skeptical reporting treats the conversation as legitimate business, not a stunt. That's the real shift in how these situations get covered now. A front office executive can reach out about a franchise cornerstone, get told no in every way but the literal word, and the story still gets treated as real, ongoing, worth tracking. Nobody's laughing this one off. That's also exactly why the story hasn't died down. Every time Curry says something new about Kerr, or the Warriors make a coaching hire, or Boston loses a game it shouldn't, the whole conversation reignites because the underlying agreement, Stevens keeps calling, the Warriors keep saying not yet, never actually closes the door. It just keeps it cracked, and reporters keep sticking a microphone in that gap every few weeks to see if anything's changed. So strip away the trade packages and the hypotheticals, and here's what Stevens actually walked away with from that call. Not a deal, but an understanding both sides seem genuinely comfortable repeating out loud. The Warriors have made their position about as clear as an organization can without issuing a formal statement. They want Curry finishing his career in the building he spent his entire career in, and they're backing that up with real money. A maximum extension reportedly on the table, not a lowball placeholder deal designed to keep options open. That's not the posture of a franchise quietly shopping its star. It's the posture of one trying to prove, through actions rather than press releases, that the plan hasn't changed even as the record has. Curry's side of it lines up just as cleanly. Every quote that's come out of him this offseason, whether it's about Kerr's return or the state of the roster or the standard the franchise still holds itself to, points toward patience rather than exit. He's talked about starting from scratch, about adjusting to a different era of the game, about trusting the partnership with Kerr that's produced 4 championships. None of that is the language of a player angling for a way out. It's the language of someone choosing to ride out a rebuild with the only franchise he's ever known. But Stevens didn't hang up the phone and walk away either, and that's the piece that keeps this whole thing alive. Boston restructured its entire cap sheet around the idea of staying flexible. George's expiring deal, the stack of first-round picks, the willingness to explore a 3-team structure just to make the money work. None of that gets built by accident. It gets built by an executive who genuinely believes the door might open eventually. Even if it's not open now, that's the actual agreement sitting at the center of this story. Not a handshake on a trade, but a mutual, almost business-like understanding that circumstances will decide this, not intentions. The Warriors get to keep saying honestly that they want Curry to retire in the only jersey he's worn. Stevens gets to keep his assets stacked and his phone line open, ready the moment a losing season or an injury or a roster collapse changes Golden State's calculus. Both things are true at the same time, and neither side has to lie to make that work. What happens next depends on things neither Stevens nor the Warriors front office fully control. It depends on whether Vogel's arrival and Kerr's return actually pull Golden State back up from a 10th place finish. It depends on whether Butler's knee holds up through a full season. It depends on whether Curry at 38 still moves like the player who dropped 26 points a night last year, or whether age finally starts closing the gap between what he wants and what his body allows. And it depends on Boston too, on whether Tatum's game actually needs the kind of shooting gravity Curry provides, or whether the Celtics find that boost somewhere else entirely, through the draft or a different trade, before Golden State's situation ever gets desperate enough to make the call turn into something real. For now, both organizations are exactly where Stevens' phone call left them, talking, watching, waiting. The Warriors are betting on loyalty and a coaching partnership that's already produced a dynasty once before. Boston is betting on patience, on picks, and on the idea that in this league, no situation stays stable forever. Somewhere between those two bets is the actual answer to what Stevens agreed to with the Warriors about Curry. Not a deal, but a truce, held together by respect on both sides, and by the quiet understanding that the next time either team's fortunes shift hard enough, that same phone line will be the first thing that gets picked up again.